everyone. My name is Iris Cahill Castellano. I'm one of the doctoral psychology interns here at Texas A&M University's Counseling on Psychological Services. Welcome to this video edition of the Anxiety Toolbox. This particular video is going to focus on how anxiety works from the perspective of the cognitive model. So let's dive in. So how does anxiety work? We're going to really break it down from this perspective, which really looks at an activating situation is going to lead to responses that we're going to have. We'll have these responses in the form of thoughts, which then influence our feelings, which influence behaviors, and then can feed right back into our thoughts, feelings, behaviors in this sort of cycle here. We also have physical sensations that then can play into this as well. And so we'll break this all down in different sections coming up now so we can understand what does all this mean. Understanding how anxiety works. We're going to look at this from the cross-sectional formulation perspective. We're going to break down the anxiety process by looking at these activating situations, considering how our thoughts or cognitive responses, our feelings or emotional responses, our behaviors that we do in response to the situation, and the physical feelings or sensations that come up for us when faced with an anxiety-provoking situation. So the situation. This is essentially the who, what, where, when, why of an anxiety-provoking situation. You want to really break down what it is that caused you to feel anxious, when and what happened and with whom, all that good stuff. And we're going to work through an example scenario together over the course of this video, which is that a person has been asked to engage in some public speaking by giving a presentation in front of their class within like the next week or so. And the person says it's a topic I don't know much about. So that is our anxiety-provoking situation. We're going to have some thoughts in response to this situation. And as we're working through the cross-sectional formulation, you really want to focus on, well, what were the thoughts that came up for you? What did the situation mean for you? What were the thoughts that flashed through your mind in response to the situation? And what images, if any, went through your mind? That could be important for those of us who are more visual thinkers. And so maybe you don't have like a sentence or words flash through your mind so much as an image. And I'll give you some examples. So thinking about that person that has to do the public speaking, the thoughts that flash through their mind might be, I'm going to sound so dumb in front of the whole class. Or maybe they have an image of themselves literally face planting in front of the whole classroom. That's going to be the cognitive response to a situation. The next part of this formulation is looking at the emotions that come up in response to an anxiety-provoking situation. You're essentially identifying the feelings or emotions that come up for you. And there could actually be several, not just one. So in the case of our example, this person felt nervous about speaking in front of the class. They felt maybe ashamed that they were feeling nervous, and maybe even a little angry or disappointed in themselves. All of these emotions came up for them in response to being asked to do this presentation. Now, the other part of this process is the behavior piece. So identifying what do you do in response to these thoughts and feelings related to an anxiety-provoking situation. And sometimes it's what you don't do that has a real impact as well. These are your actions, right? Really identifying the behavioral response that you have. In our example, this person was so upset about the idea of doing a presentation that they decided to not even work on it, okay? They just decided to avoid it altogether because it was so anxiety-provoking. Now, there's also this physical dimension to the cognitive process or the cognitive model, which is physical feelings might come up for you. And that's basically like, what are the sensations that you have in response to an anxiety-provoking situation? Maybe your heart starts racing or the palms got sweaty. Sometimes it's feeling short of breath or having a knot in the pit of your stomach. Those physical feelings are then like a physical cue that feeds into this whole process. So you also want to pay attention to that dimension of this cross-sectional formulation. So here's the tricky part. it's not just a one-way street. This process of moving from thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and physical sensations can actually be a spiral, right? And to break that example down for you to show how this can subsequently feed into each other, that behavior of avoiding to prepare for the presentation could very much lead into further thoughts of, I'm such a bad student, I can't even prepare for this presentation. The presentation is going to be terrible, which then leads into even more negative feelings like being angry at yourself, feeling even more ashamed or disappointed, which then just continues to feed right back into this anxiety cycle. And it can continue down this downward spiral until you're feeling pretty much not great and the anxiety is pretty intense. So here's the key part in terms of understanding how anxiety works. We're going to spend some time focusing on the thoughts, because changing the way that you think about a situation can change how you feel about the situation. So paying real close attention to how you interpret a situation is the key here. And I've got a couple of examples here that we can work through. On the left-hand side is the example we just did, where the person that has to do a presentation in front of class feels like they're such a bad student, they can't even prepare, presentation is going to be terrible, and having those negative emotions directed towards themselves, like being angry or ashamed, and the anxiety cycle continues feeding into itself. Now, if this person were to shift their thoughts just a little bit, let's see what happens. Here on the right-hand side of the screen, the person might come up with a thought of like, you know what, the presentation might not be perfect, but doing my best is what matters. That thought can lead to a totally different set of emotions, including feeling more calm, maybe a little bit proud about yourself, and certainly more self-compassionate. In doing that, shifting their thoughts just a little bit, feelings change and the anxiety cycle can be interrupted. We want to help you work through your anxiety cycle. And we'd like you to do that by working through your own cross-sectional formulation. We've got the PDF worksheets up on the CAPS website for you to download, and it's going to look like the image that we've got here, where you'll identify a situation that was anxiety-provoking, and you're going to note your physical response, your cognitive response, aka your thoughts. You'll note your behavior, like what you did in response to that situation, and you'll also note the emotions that came up for you in response. And to help support you with that, we've also uploaded a feelings wheel PDF, which will give you some vocabulary to help you identify all the different emotional responses that you might be having or experiencing. The point of doing this is to slow down your anxiety process. I want you to really think about identifying those thoughts and those emotions, really spending some time noting what happens for you and how anxiety is working for you. In doing this process and slowing it down, you're going to start to see places where you can break the cycle, like places where maybe if you could shift and pivot just a little bit, then maybe the downward spiral can be interrupted. And that's why I would suggest paying special attention to the thoughts piece, because as we've talked about earlier, changing the way you think about a situation or the way you interpret the meaning behind a situation can have a big impact in how that cycle plays out. So for some additional information, I've got some resources here that might be helpful for you, including links to Psychology Today and the Anxiety and Depression Association of America's websites. That's just going to have more info to help you understand this anxiety process and what that might look like. I've also included a book recommendation on here called Mind Over Mood, which can help you really think about different ways of changing thoughts to help your overall well-being. The thing about all of these sites is they're also operating from that perspective of the cognitive model, which you just got a little brief introduction to right now. So I invite you to work through that cross-sectional formulation and start to understand how anxiety is working in your everyday, and to start thinking about where you can find places to break that anxiety cycle. Thank you so much for checking out this video, and stay tuned for more videos based on the Anxiety Toolbox series. Thank you all so much.